Live. Hello, California and beyond. I'm Lori Woodley, CEO and founder of All It Takes. I'm here with Annie Bauman. Did I say that right, Annie?
Bauman.
Annie Bauman. Should have checked on that first. Carol Green and Mike Johnson. I'm here with them from the trenches of education, meeting you in the trenches of education. On our very first of the year monthly Educator series webinar, bringing to you into your homes, your classrooms, your after school programs, voices that you can relate to. Brought to you by CalHOPE Schools Initiative and All It Takes. We are going to come to you every fourth Tuesday of the month for this school year, offering support, free support and services for the mental health of every California educator and every person in the public school education ecosystem. That means that we're here for parents, we're here for custodians, we're here for teachers, we're here for counselors, we're here for admin. We're here for the ecosystem who together and collectively we are serving the students of California, bringing them the best opportunity for a solid year of education through really growth mindset and mental health that feels good and feels healthy for each person. I'd like to introduce you to our panelists today. With me, Annie Bauman is an 8th grade teacher up in, Northern California, but not way north, kind of central Northern California. Mike Johnson coming to us from Eastern LA area, out in Corona, correct? Yeah. Out in Corona. And Carol Green, joining us from Sacramento or wherever it is that you live, right?
As the San Diego.
Oh, San Diego. As the president of the California State PTA. I'm going to let each of them tell you a little bit about themselves. But first, we want to let you know that we're here to talk about back to school. Back to school this year's different than any other year. And I think prior to the pandemic, we all thought the beginning of every school year was new and exciting. And now it's new and it's exciting. And it's also revisiting something that we are experiencing that's new, right? Like different because our kids are in a different place. Our educators are in a different place. And CalHOPE Schools Initiative is bringing these free mental health resources because what we found and what you know in the trenches is that so many people have really been challenged with mental health issues, whether it's extreme or it's mild. Either we ourselves or someone we care about and love has really been through something or continues to go through something. So we want to be here to help make that journey easier and much more rewarding on the other side. So Annie, tell us a little bit about you and why you joined us today.
All right. So this is my 18th year teaching. I've been primarily a middle school teacher for the last 18 years. Last year was a challenging year. And so I'm here to kind of talk about what that experience looked like and just really excited to be a part of this.
Thank you for joining us, Annie. And this is your first day of school, right?
This is our first day of school. So we are one of the districts that started a little bit later, and we're ready to go. Happy first day.
Happy first day. So you really can talk about that. Perfect. Hey, Mike, how about you?
Well, hi, everyone. My name is Mike Johnson. This is my 3rd year as a counselor. So my first year as a counselor, it was like trial by fire. It was straight into the pandemic. So all I've known in education has been the challenges like we face adapting to, the challenges that COVID-19 brought. And this is my second week of school, and we actually had back to school night yesterday. And it really opened my eyes and showed me how much I was missing from having these relationships with our parents and our families, and our guardians just coming out and getting to see that aspect of, the school system that I was missing through the pandemic. And I'm here today just share my experiences, and you know, I'm happy to be here.
Well, we're happy to have you, Mike. Thank you for joining us. And Carol, the woman who serves millions of parents who are at home with their kids every day.
Happy to be here. I'm the president of the California State PTA, and it's the parents that are working with the schools and navigating the new normal as we try to support our children and our schools and our teachers and our counselors, and need a lot of help, and we all need to work together. So I'm happy to be here. We have schools starting in California as early as the middle of July and as late as after Labor Day. So back to school season is long in California.
Perfect. We're right there at the, right in the middle with Annie starting today, right? So those of you who are already back to school, I like to think of this. Every day is a new start. So if you hear something today and you're like, oh, I can't start that because I already started school 3 weeks ago, every day is a new day. We can do something, implement something, have a different kind of smile, a different kind of warmth. We can start a new process, a new procedure anytime we choose. So tomorrow's a new day. And I hope today that you'll have something to take with you. I want to share, an insight that I've had. I was 30 years in education, 25 years as a school counselor in California, several different districts. And I know that so many people during virtual teaching were like, this is the hardest thing. We don't know how to do this. We've never done this before. There was like nobody who didn't agree that it was hard and we've never done it before. And there was no fire drill for it, right? So we didn't even practice it. It was brand new. And educators and kids and parents rallied. It wasn't perfect and it was messy. And it's still, kids knew that somebody had their back, right? So even if they didn't show up on camera, they never took their pajamas off, if they knew somebody had their back, we got through that. We go into last year, and so many people I was talking to were like, we're going back to normal. Well, what's normal anyways, right? Every person in their own house and their own skin has their own unique circumstance that is called their normal. So the concept of going back to normal that we seem to have in the ecosystem always sort of intrigued me, because what was normal before, if we're really looking at individual kids, then there isn't a normal, because every child has a different normal based on where they're coming from. And every teacher, every administrator, every counselor has a different normal. And so when we got back last year, and Annie, you and I talked about this, so maybe I'll ask you to talk about this first. It wasn't what we thought. And it was a different kind of year. Will you talk about what your year was like last year, and then what you learned from it that you started today as a first day of school differently because of what you learned last year?
So last year, it was interesting. My first year of teaching, I felt like it was the hardest year ever. And then after that, it was going to be smooth sailing. And each year had its own little challenges, getting to know new personalities, working with different groups of kids. But some things were the same. And I think going into the remote learning year, the expectation was that it was going to be weird. And the expectation was it was going to be challenging. And I remember thinking, this is the hardest year of my teaching career. Scrap the first year. The first year was a cakewalk compared to this. And the isolation of last year and not having the same, or not last year, but the remote year, the isolation of being kind of at home and not being in the classroom. Alameda County was one of the counties that was maybe remote for the longest. We had really strict COVID guidelines because of the numbers in our population. And so there was a lot of isolation there. And moving forward into last year, I think that the expectation was things are going to be easier because I'm in my classroom. It's going to magically fix everything. But that wasn't the reality of it. So it was almost more disheartening because of that expectation that things were going to be easier, and then the reality of them not being easier. Definitely threw a curveball to a lot of us. There was a different type of isolation. We were back on campus, but kids were still wearing masks and we couldn't see those facial expressions. We didn't meet as a full staff all the time because if one of us went down, the rest of us went down, and we wanted to make sure that teachers could be in the classroom. So the sense of community wasn't necessarily there, and that definitely made for a more challenging year for me as a teacher.
And so what are you bringing into learning from that? What are you or your school, what are like one or two things that you're like, oh my gosh, this is going to help us? This already feels uplifting.
So our school does a great job of just really loving our kids and knowing who our students are. My administration here is phenomenal. So I think that the culture building and the togetherness is going to be a main focus. Really having the kids know what our core values are, teaching that explicitly, and building the community has always been important. And this year we're starting that off with more events to bring the kids together, to bring the staff together, and to have an overall positive message. And it started at the district level. So last year for our district, we have a kickoff at the beginning of the year. Everything was virtual. People were in classrooms, people were on campus. This year they brought all of the teachers together for a really great message. The message coming from Livermore Unified is to keep it simple. Keep things simple, to move forward, and to have fun with the kids. So I think that having that as the message coming from our district office and trickling down to each campus, it's really going to help to have the kids feel that they're safe and they're comfortable in an academic environment where they're allowed to maybe not necessarily fail at something, but learn by making mistakes and not being judged for it.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. And what a great place to be for the kids that you're serving. And it sounds like for you too. Mike, do you want to share what, your experience last year was and then what you're bringing into this year?
Yeah. So our experience last year in our district, and especially at our school site, we really wanted to welcome students back after the disruption of learning and, coming back from distance learning into in-person and all of the stressors and challenges that students were facing in that transition. We really wanted to create a safe space last year and just help students get back to feeling comfortable on campus. But kind of like what Annie said, it's just like we faced some unforeseen challenges due to quarantines and trying to create some of these community building activities with on Zoom or just in spaces where everyone we weren't risking a school-wide quarantine or something like that, so it was hard to create that sense of community and welcome students back to this safe space when we were limited on the amount of face-to-face interaction we could have. Having the masks, we had a little bit of pushback in our community about that, but also it did kind of interrupt those connections because we couldn't see facial expressions, and so there's those types of barriers were really challenging when we were trying to welcome our students back, and also the connection with our staff. Everyone was working very hard at my site to create that safe space, but with that and the daily challenges throughout the year, our messages, we weren't in unison with our messages and how we were teaching expectations for students and how we were supporting individual behavior and reteaching, some of the skills that help students be successful in schools, communication when I'm frustrated, just communication in general, honestly, not using our hands, boundaries, safe spaces, and all that stuff. I feel like as a staff, because we didn't have the spaces to meet together and really talk through things and get on the same page, we were all in our silos working very hard, trying to bring all these opportunities within the new guidelines of COVID-19 and all of that stuff, because we couldn't do like the field trips or bring presenters or create these like opportunities that were outside of the classroom that would like help students want to be at our school. So we would try all these different things, but kind of working independently. And this year, to meet that and create a little bit more of a more community within our staff, because when our staff feels supported, then everyone's in a better place to meet the needs of our individual students. So that was one thing that we tried this year really hard to do, is to meet as a team, agree on expectations, agree on how we're going to support students and what our common language is and stuff like that, so we can move forward together. And it will help create, our hope was that all of our students, regardless of who they talk to, where they're at, they they have an idea of how we're going to respond as a group. And when we can create that predictability, one, our staff feels supported because I can look to my left and my right and know that we're all speaking the same language. And then for our students, it was, um, that predictability creates a sort of sense of safety. Like, even if I make a mistake, I can, you know, I know Mr. Johnson's going to talk to me a certain way and help me, learn from that mistake, or, lift me up instead of, just a punishment or something like that.
Opportunity to learn versus shame.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, so we will come back and circle back around to this concept of teacher support with a conversation in a bit, Mike. So thank you for bringing that forward, because I think that we really need to spend some time in that arena, like supporting each other who are in service to kids, so that we have the skills. So we'll come back to that. Carol, in your role, serving literally millions of parents, because we have millions of kids in the state, last year versus this year, like what did you experience in general from parents last year? And then what did you learn, and how you might be guiding or coaching differently this year?
Sure. I think that what both Annie and Mike said is that, you thought it was the hardest when we were all virtual and at home. But I would say that, at least now in hindsight, I didn't think this at the time, we knew what we were expecting. We knew we were going to be virtual. So we knew that the kids were going to be learning virtually. We knew we were going to be supervising kids. We knew that the parent interaction was going to be virtual. So we adapted to that, some better than others. The challenge of last year and then this year is, how much can we do in person, and what is it going to look like? So as parents are trying to work with schools to have, as Michael was saying, field trips and, people coming in to talk in the classrooms and all the fun, class plays and talent shows and all that. How much can we do? How much can the parents be on campus? How much can they interact? And I think that's been the most challenge that we've had. But we know from decades of research that when, our families, and when I say the word family, I'm not talking about always mom and dad. Families come in all kinds of sizes and shapes and stripes. So whatever your family is, that's what I'm talking about, whether it's through blood or just a relationship. But the loving adults and the kids, when they work with the schools, we know that that's the most successful. And I would say the big takeaways are relationships, building those real relationships, the families with the teachers, with the counselors, with the principal. And then I think you mentioned not comparing, but also not transferring your own anxiety onto your child. I will say that the kids are watching the parents. And so try to be that loving, forgiving person. If you're saying something about a person that is wearing a mask or not wearing a mask or doing something that you think is wrong or right, and you don't know their whole circumstance, then your child's going to pick up on that. So if we're all as accepting as we can be, and if we're all as tolerant and patient as we can be, then that helps us navigate that. And it teaches our kids some pretty valuable lessons. Even in middle school, they are watching you. Even when you think that they're not watching you, they're watching you.
Oh, I could, as a parent expert and a school counselor, I could not agree more that we are more powerful in every way in what we do and how we demonstrate things and moods across our face, way more than what comes out of our mouth. They're watching, they're picking up, and also our kids today are just laser beams, especially when you hit that 6th grade and up, 7th, 8th, laser beams for hypocrisy. The minute we say you need to, but I don't, man, we have lost them. And we're going to do a parent series also on this CalHOPE initiative through All It Takes this year. So we'll have some very specific things around parenting. Carol, you must come back, because that is definitely the community that you serve. So, so thank you all for what your shares are. And I want to move to the sense of emotion. So when we walk into school this year, so Annie, you started today, Mike, you started a couple weeks ago, parents are dropping their kids off at school for a whole new year. There's a lot more confidence, but not 100% understanding what's next and what's going to happen with the pandemic, with COVID. What are some of the emotions that you have experienced yourself, and how do you do that dance between I'm anxious and excited at the same time? Like, what do you like? How do you allow kids to be that and voice that so that they feel like whatever they're experiencing is okay in the setting that they're in? Anybody want to address that question? It's big.
Yeah, I can.
Great, Mike.
So I feel like whenever I'm with a student, I feel like knowledge is power. So I really try to take them through like what emotions are, and that everyone experiences different intensities of those emotions, and that really try to normalize what they're feeling, and then help them put the pieces of the puzzle together of like, how did I get here? So we'll kind of, I like using your notice. I use that today actually.
Notice, choose, act.
Notice, choose, act. Yeah. So we do a lot of like body scanning, like let's notice let's kind of identify what emotion you're feeling, and then notice like how your body responds to this particular emotion. And if we're able to identify those things, then especially for our negative emotions, we can plan, right, and choose the best coping skill when we start to feel those symptoms. Like if I get anxious about walking into a new room, and I know that my heart starts beating fast, and I can start identifying and communicating some of these things that I'm feeling that are contributing to my negative emotion, then I can ask for support. But most importantly, I can, with the help of someone, if I don't have these skills already, like use appropriate coping skills to help manage those emotions and get through that moment. So it's like that's kind of what I used today. Actually, I had a student who was a little anxious about, it was her first day at school. So starting in the middle of the school year, right? Everyone's kind of comfortable, and she was not. So we just kind of noticed, and then we brainstormed some options, and then acted. And that's the biggest thing, right? It's like we have to practice, and creating that space, and being patient, and helping, and like walking students through that process, because it's not a natural process. We're not born like understanding all these things. So um, being able to take the time and uh, really help our students increase their self-awareness, and then connect them with people and safe places on campus where they can practice, you know, either just noticing, or, increasing that self-awareness, or start practicing those coping skills to add to their toolbox. Um, but having those safe places on campus to do so, and those safe people on campus that they trust and that will take the time to help them through that process. Um, that's kind of where I go to help students with all the ranges of emotions that they're feeling, especially in a new school year.
It's really awesome to be able to be in a position where you can allow students to have all the emotions and to be able to explore them. Annie and Carol, just to expand on that, and thank you so much, Mike. One of the things that I hear from educators and parents is their own discomfort with the emotions that kids can present. So sometimes that discomfort that we experience has us wanting to invite them towards us and have them feel safe. But if they tell me something that makes me uncomfortable, then I don't know what to do with it. And if I don't know what to do with it, then I don't know how to support this student and I have to touch. And so we get in our heads, right, about what I'm not capable of if they present a certain way. And I like to say that our educators' role isn't to be the healers, but it's to be the invitation for healing to happen simply because their space is safe. The atmosphere that they create is safe for kids to explore. Obviously not throw chairs across the room, right? There are boundaries, and that's not what we're talking about. And there's experts able to help with those more extreme situations. But Annie, like how do you deal with your comfort level of maintaining a boundary as a teacher and also allowing a student to feel comfortable to express to you?
That's a great question. With this being the first day of school, in terms of my students and handling their emotions, I think that being honest and having conversations with them is key. So I'm as nervous on the first day of school as my students are, and I like to allow them to see that by just being honest and telling them. I have back to school nightmares just like you do. They might be a little bit different because I'm having a back to school nightmare, like I don't have anything printed up. Yours might be about what you're wearing on the first day. So being honest and opening up that communication and letting them see that side, that nobody's perfect and everybody has something that they're dealing with, so that they feel like they have a safe person to come speak to. On the other side, I have daughters as well. And so thinking about what I want for my kids in terms of how I want adults to treat them when they're on campus helps me to reflect on how I treat my students, because they are somebody's child. They are somebody's baby. And keeping that in mind and giving them the structure that they need, giving them a safe place where they can come to talk to an adult, I think is huge. Even if I'm not their go-to adult on campus, I definitely want to have those conversations with my students so that they know that there's somebody here who's going to stop and listen to them.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you're not afraid. You might be nervous about what kind of emotions come at you, but you're not letting that stop you from allowing it to happen. And I think that's one of the modeling things that we want to be for our students. Again, what we want from them, we really do need to offer them. So, like there's a courage thing to say, all right, if you show up today angry, walking in my door, I'm willing to meet you, and to, let you, share with me. We'll talk about and train, how do we share angry feelings? But I'm not going to say you can't share them. And I'm not, you're right. So I really appreciate, Annie, that both you're in your classroom yourself and as the culture of your school, that allowing and inviting students to share what's happening with them is really great. And Carol, for parents, what are your thoughts or tips for parents to be able to navigate their child's emotions without getting fully sucked into them?
I think it's always challenging. And of course we have our own emotions too. So you're trying to support your child through their process, and then you have your own. I think that where it relates to back to school, we really need to think about what Mike said about communication and about building those relationships. And I think sometimes if the only communication we have with the school, if it's the counselor, the teacher, the principal, is when something big happened, like someone was so upset that they did throw a chair or they did something mean to someone else. But if we have that communication all the time and you're able to say, oh, Annie, my daughter, my son didn't get a lot of sleep last night because grandma was overlaid, or this situation is happening with our family where they're worried about, somebody who's sick. If you have those kinds of conversations, then that helps the teacher and the counselor work with their student, because they know a little bit. I mean, it's not every single day is a big, 4-hour counseling session. You don't have time for that. But if we keep those lines of communication open and we have good relationships, then that helps, I think, the counselors and the teachers and the parents all be working together. And for my children, I always, we take a breath. How are you feeling? And, just because you don't want to hear how they're feeling, or you might be afraid of something they're going to say, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Right. So you have to be willing to meet them where they are, and then keep those relationships and the communication open, because then we can all work together, and that helps to support the children that we care about.
Yeah, I want to circle back towards the end of this time together, Carol, with you, just for you to think about and be able to share with us, like, one top tip on how, from your perspective, schools can invite parents closer and how parents can take the step in. So I think that we all kind of in education agree that we need to be more collaborative, parents and schools, and some schools struggle with that, and some parents struggle to feel safe to walk in the door. So if you have a tip on that towards the end, I'd love to hear what that is. So thank you all for what you're sharing. It's just such a powerful thing to know, one, we're not alone, and two, there are some answers, and there's no perfect answer, but there's a way forward, right? And so that's what I'm hearing from all of you. Like, the word relationship keeps coming up over and over again. And in our film, A Trusted Space, Redirecting Grief to Growth, it's all about relationships. And it is the number one thing. Relationships are the number one antidote to emotional stressors and trauma, from those things becoming something that affects a whole lifetime rather than an incident or a couple incidents and a couple of years. So I just appreciate so much that relationships are your focus. Now let's shift gears a little bit to only the adults for a moment. We all know that our job, our client, I even like to say our students are our clients, right? We're supposed to make them happy. Now, that doesn't mean give them everything. Bosses are supposed to make employees happy, right? To a point, right? It's a mutual exchange, right? But they are our clients. We are here to be in service to them, to their current, their now, and to their future. And every one of us in the education ecosystem has an impact on every student. If you're the janitor, the bus driver, the teacher, Michael was in a statewide PSA that you guys will probably start seeing in the next month or two across the state last week when we shot it. And we interviewed and talked to bus drivers, custodians, teachers, counselors, so many people in the ecosystem who all said, yes, I want to be a part of this because I am a part of the ecosystem of making a safe place and a trusted space for students. So it was really heartwarming to see how many people wanted to be a part of that voice from every different facet in the system. So in that, there's millions of students, millions of parents, but what about the millions of staff in the education system in California? All the various roles that I just mentioned, admin, superintendent down, boards of education down. There is no up because I believe we're all in this together. So we have equal footing on what our importance is and the role of the kids that we're serving. So what is your thought on, and we'll start with you here, Mike. What is your thought on the importance of making sure that those in service to students are being cared for as much as we're asking them to care for our kids? It's a different kind of conversation that hasn't been a big focus prior to the pandemic. And I personally believe it needs to be a massive focus now because every human is experiencing something new coming out of the pandemic, every human. So if we talk just education, we don't ask a math teacher to teach calculus without first teaching math. but we are sometimes asking our teachers to be in service to the mental health of our students without necessarily focusing on theirs. Do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, it goes back to the age-old example, or yeah, well, when you're in the airplane, right? If it's going down, you got to put your mask on first before you can help someone else. And I think, especially, you know, it stood out earlier. I forget who said it, but our students are always watching us, right? So if we're having a bad day and we don't have the space or the resources or the support to kind of deal with whatever's going on, we're going to bring that into our spaces. And our students are going to read it, they're going to feel it. And that could be a negative for that environment, or it could be an opportunity to show, like, our emotions stay with us as we grow up. And, we learn how to handle them, and we learn how to, um, like, get through them. And it's okay to have these feelings and these ups and downs. But I think, it's important. Probably the most important thing is to support our staff, because, um, like, that creates that sense of stability and safety that allows them to create those relationships, um, and have those tough conversations and be able to, like, have the space to check in with the student and really be curious about what's going on. Because when I'm having a good day, I'm definitely way more open to sit and, have a conversation if I have an endless to-do list. I think in education, there's always something that needs to be done, and there's always a deadline around the corner. Um, and sometimes that's the added stress that takes away from those that time we can spend with students, because our mind's not present. Our mind's, on some of these other things that our students and maybe our colleagues, they don't see because they're underneath the surface. So if we have that support, um, it's just going to help facilitate the culture on campus.
I think we can't give from what we don't have, right? Carol, do you want to speak to this, and then we'll go to you, Annie?
Well, I would just say that we have to give our staff and those that support our students as much support as we can, because, I mean, I thought of the same example. So Mike stole all my ideas. I was thinking of you've got to support yourself. You've got to take care of yourself in order to be able to serve anyone else. And that is definitely true of our school staff, especially under all the pressure that they're under these days, from not just the pandemic, but from all the things that are going on in schools, and teacher shortages and bus driver shortages and all of that. So making sure that they're supportive. And I would say to the parents out there, make sure that you're giving support and not just trying to catch teachers or someone doing something wrong. We want to be working together to support each other, and our staff need mental health support as much, if not more, than others.
Yeah. Thank you, Carol. Annie, do you have anything you want to add?
I do. So I feel like this is definitely one of the things that was a huge challenge as a result of the pandemic. So prior to teaching virtually, I feel like I had a little bit more of a balance with work-life stuff, even though my school was further away. I did change schools last year to be closer to home. So when we went remote, my work-life balance went out the window. It was all about what I was doing for my students, being online, converting lessons so that they could be presented in a digital platform. And as soon as I was done with that, it was checking on my kids. And there was very little downtime or time to focus on what I needed to do in terms of keeping myself energized, going to the gym, exercising, meeting up with friends, because everything was so different. So I think that coming back to this year and coming back last year, there's always a lot of talk of teachers who need to find self-care. self-care, take care of yourself first. And it's hard as a teacher and as a parent to find the time to do that. So we do a lot of things at the beginning of the year with setting goals and growth mindset. And it's important for me to share some of my goals with my classes as well. And one of them is getting unplugged a little bit earlier in the day. So if we unplug ourselves and I'm not responding to emails at 9 o'clock at night because it comes on my phone, because I'm not looking at my phone, I want to spend that time with my family. So trying to find ways and to model that for our kids is important. And it's such a challenge for so many educators to do, to find the time to do just even an hour at the gym or a walk or hanging out with a friend. Those things are important. And with our staff, I think it's also important to take the time to get together outside of school so that we have that downtime and we can talk to each other and build those relationships. So when we come to school, it's that community, it's that workspace where you enjoy being where you're at because you enjoy the people that you work with. Mm-hmm. And we're definitely making a point to do more of that on our campus this year because the community is important.
Yeah. Our community is where we get the support that we need to do anything, right? Like we're really, the lone wolf doesn't survive really well. The pack needs the wolf and the wolf needs the pack. So I think that it's really great to look at self-care. And I think Mike, you said it with the oxygen mask, A Trusted Space, the film talks about that. Annie, you just gave some ideas. And I'd like to say that when my kids were young and I was in public school as a counselor and doing all the things moms do there wasn't any time and I did lose track of that. And it wasn't really good for me or really my kids. And, I can look back because my kids, Annie, your kids are young, and Carol, your kids are grown. And Michael, I don't think you have kids yet. I think that's the way it goes. And there's a lot of things that we can look at. And I wish that I had somebody saying that 5 minutes is enough. Sometimes in busy people's lives, just taking 5 minutes consciously, purposely for us. One, it's the conscious effort to say I matter. And I think that that's important. And it too is to acknowledge that I'm a busy person and I chose to be a parent. I chose to be an educator. I chose these things. So I have a lot of responsibilities and that's okay. But I get to be a part of the responsibilities. Like I get to be a piece of the list of priorities. And it's urgent that we do that. So if you're out there in our audience and you're like, I don't have time, 5 minutes, just start there. Think of things and if you're in any kind of chat platform, throw out a few things. What do you do if you only have 5 minutes? What do you do? Put it in a chat format if you're listening and let other people see what you do, because it might be an inspiration for what they do. And Annie, what you were saying is like when you come together as community, as a staff, when you share great ideas, then you could do, then we're better. And so when we bring people together in community building activities, whether it's our students or our staff, we're always learning from something from our community. And so I think that's really great. I also like to think of staff meetings. I'm not sure if this is happening yet, but administration's often asking teachers to do a lot of community building in their classrooms. And I like to encourage administrators to take 5 to 10 minutes every staff meeting. It's like you saying, Annie, I'm unplugging at like 9 to be focused on my family, when really in your head, you're like, I don't have time to unplug at 9, but you're doing it. And a staff, an admin who's going to run a staff meeting, I don't have time to do 5 or 10 minutes of team building because I've got all these things to do. And I encourage the opportunity to find, we'll never find the time. I think of it, we have to make or take the time. We have to make it such a priority that we take the time in an hour, figure out the other things, and make sure we do some kind of community building each time we come together. So thank you all, all of you for these great insights. There's a concept that I have people talk about often, and that's this thought about relationships over rules. Now, not in place of them, right? But that there's always some non-negotiables, which are safety. Like your kids come to your classes, Carol, your parents send kids to school. They want to know that they're safe. They want to know there's plans for when something gets unsafe. They want to know their kids are safe. So there's some non-negotiables. Those are hard rules. I can't leave my classroom and disappear. I need to know where you are. I'm sending you home whole and complete and happy to your parents every day. That's my commitment, right? But what about the thought that relationships, when I went to school, and even still today, I hear educators going, I can't even smile for the first few weeks. Even today, in this year, I've heard that a couple times. It's got to be all structure because otherwise they take advantage. What are your thoughts about that? Do they take advantage when the rules are clear, but they're minimal and the relationships are built?
So I'll jump in on that one. I've heard in the past, and I don't actually live by the rule, mean until Halloween. And so that you get that structure in as a teacher, you're studying the standards, and then after that you can loosen up a little bit. I don't think I really have a mean face. I mean, maybe I do. It depends. You can ask my children. But heard mean until Halloween, and I don't think that's true. In the past, there have been so many different programs that I've seen between Choose Love and Character Strong and A Trusted Space, where it really is important to have a relationship with your students. And one of the things that stuck with me from Character Strong a couple of years ago was it's hard to learn from someone you don't like. It's hard to learn from someone who you don't think likes you. And it's hard to dislike somebody that you know. And so putting all of that together, having those relationships with the students is important. So if I have a child who's displaying a behavior that's not appropriate in the classroom, I'd rather just be able to have the relationship and talk to them about it and not send them out. What can they do to improve the behavior so that we can have a working environment so that the academics are there? So having those relationships is key when it comes to, I don't even want to say discipline, because you don't have to discipline a student if you can just have a conversation with them.
Yeah. I just had somebody reach out to me yesterday and say, or actually just this morning, a school counselor, and said, we're moving away from discipline, more into restorative. Mm-hmm. What are some ideas on how to use your notice, choose, act on that? So that was just a conversation today from a district counselor in a school district local to me. And I really was heartened to hear that they, moving the conversation away from discipline from a district level. Hoping it's a district, could have been just the school, but I think it's more of a district philosophy. Like, how do we work in the restorative conversation while still holding kids accountable, but more about accountability actually helps us grow. Accountability is part of an SEL skill set, right? To be able to own what I create, even when it's an ouch, or when it's a celebration. Like, yeah, I did that. This is what I'm going to do different next time. And those conversations rather than kind of the finger pointing and shaming.
And when a reflection can be a part of the conversation, I think that that's really powerful and really meaningful. And I think that we can all probably think about a time in our past where maybe as a child, if I did something and my parents yelled at me, it might have just gone over my head. To whereas if I got I'm disappointed in you, or I'm not disappointed in you, but disappointed in what you've done, that always hits harder. And it's always something where it's like, oh, I'd rather you just yell at me. Because it doesn't hurt as much, and I don't really care if I change that behavior. But if it's that I'm disappointed in what you did, it makes you second guess it, and you're more likely to not repeat that behavior or that action. And so I think that comes in with building those relationships, because kids don't want to disappoint you. They're coming here and they're giving their best. They're doing what they need to do, and that's the last thing that they want to do. And so I think that recognizing that and having the conversation is more meaningful for them, and it creates a better learning environment in my classroom.
Because when others see you treat one person who maybe has, that moment with kindness and respect and dignity, and assertive, like, let's solve this because this isn't okay, but
Yeah.
I love you and we're going to do it coming from a place of love and care and dignity, then everyone else actually trusts you too. They understand that if they fall down, they're not going to be shamed. And so the trust is like, like you said, they're always watching. Mike, do you have anything you want to add at this?
Yeah, I love the high expectations and high empathy because I think one without the other, you know, it sends the wrong message, right? If it's all empathy and no accountability or low expectations, then we're letting like students or our clients get away with things that aren't going to help them be successful when they leave our school system, like when they go into our community. But also, if it's all discipline and no empathy, it's sometimes that breeds shame and resentment, and we lose that connection with our students. And like Annie said, if I don't like you, I'm not going to learn from you. So if we can, you know, maintain our high expectations and expect the best from our students, but also walk with them and meet them where they're at. That's where the empathy comes in. Like my expectations for you or for my school, like they're not changing. This is what they are. And if you're not meeting them, I'm going to help you learn, or grow to like meet this expectation. But we're going to be right there with you with support, conversation, to make sure you understand, um, like what's missing, and if and then also provide you with the tools to get there, or start practicing, uh, just so we can learn and grow. I think another like just example from today, we had a student who um, he rode his bike onto campus, wasn't listening to like our head custodian, and almost ran him over because he was late for school, right? So instead of just receiving discipline for that, and I think this kind of speaks to supporting our staff as well. um, you know we let it kind of go for a day. The student received a discipline, and then like I touched base with them today, reviewed what happened. Like I understand you were late, but that's not an excuse to disrespect someone, right? Or put someone in danger by almost running them over. It's not an excuse to put someone else, in harm's way, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And then like reviewing that situation and having students reflect, because that self reflection is where we find growth, and that self reflection without judgment is makes it easier to kind of look in and identify those areas where maybe we could have made a better decision, or maybe we could, just learn from our mistakes, you know, and then having the opportunity to come back and repair a relationship that could have been broken for the rest of the school year. It's only the second week of school, but that's like hopefully a lasting lesson because he experienced it, where just because I make a mistake, I don't have to like leave or end the day and carry that shame or carry that disappointment in myself with me. Like I can work with that. Like with the support, I can learn how to have those tough conversations where I know I messed up, but I don't know how to say sorry, or I don't know how to make it better. Um, and I think with discipline, we miss an opportunity to really build those skills in our students.
Yeah. Makes me remember many times as a counselor on site, Mike, was when you have a student who just gives the same teacher a hard time day after day after day, and you finally bring them all together, and a lot of times the kid doesn't want to, or the parent doesn't want you to do it with the kid, or the teacher doesn't want to, and you finally, as a counselor, get them all in the room together, the kid, the counselor, the teacher, you have a conversation, and it was one silly thing said on the second day of school that like literally just a conversation and an understanding, and I'm like, gosh, I didn't even know I said that, and I can see and hear how that hurt you. And yet that, like the student just felt dismissed from, stock talk, especially that middle school age and up, where you're at, Annie, like that one conversation can really affect the long term. So I just really I appreciate what you were saying. I do want to come back to, we're about 6 minutes off, and we will stop at that time at 4:30. I want to come back to a question we got from a viewer, someone named Daniel, that was sent to me, that asked about how to deal with boundaries with students. And I'm not sure the context of that. All we can do is make it up. But Carol, when you think about boundaries and around relationships, what are your thoughts there, and how would you coach a parent and or a teacher working with a parent's child and everybody's upset?
It's so funny that you just said that, because I just wrote down on a piece of paper in front of me, boundaries and relationships. Those were the two words I wrote down. Didn't write down the rest of what I was going to complete thought on that sense. But I would say that boundaries for students or your kids at home are important so they know where the guardrails are. And I think that knowing where the boundaries are, and they'll push the boundaries. That's their job, is to push the boundaries so that they know exactly where they are. But I think both Annie and Mike said that when kids have the relationship with the teacher or with their parent, they know that the behavior might not be tolerated, but they're always going to be loved, or at least respected and cared for. So it's not that if you push a boundary and there's pushback, your self-worth isn't in question. The relationship that you have with the teacher or the counselor or the parent's not in question. You know that relationship is always solid, but these are the boundaries. So I'd say when parents are working with their students and the teachers, to be clear where all those boundaries were, so that when you're talking to your child, you're not saying, Mr. Johnson was good, bad, or anything like that. Mr. Johnson has the rules for the school, and you're not allowed to ride into the custodian, even if you're late. So let's not do that next time, or how can we address this next time? So the parents have to work with the school, with the counselors and the teachers, to make sure that their student understands the boundaries. And when they can best all work on that together, that's the best results. I would also say that if your child has a reason for not wanting that rule, or they think it's really dumb, then you could express that to the teacher, but I wouldn't do it in front of them. So you could say, my child doesn't like that rule of, having to whatever it is, because he or she feels that this is, wrong or different. And then the teacher can reassess that and say, oh, yeah, maybe that's not really a boundary we need to have. But again, that's that relationship building between the parent and the teacher or the counselor, and between the parent and the student and the teacher, and all that triangle that goes along with that.
Right. The three-leg stool can't do one without the other, right? Or it can't do two without the third. Carol, I know we were going to circle back around that question. Thank you for what you just shared, and around how we can bring parents closer to schools and schools be more inviting, or find ways. They might already think they're being inviting, but parents still aren't coming in, or, what is that dynamic? And we're really out of time for this. So I'm wondering if we could have you back at one of our parent webinars, where we
Happy to come back.
can have that conversation with parents, like, how do you approach a school, and what do we need to ask for from schools, and how do we do that with appropriate boundaries so schools don't feel afraid of us, right? And that we feel safe to walk into a school. So it's a mutual dance. I want to just share with all of you, first off, thank you. Thank you for your professionalism. Thank you for your heart. And thank you for the deep care that you offer to the students of California, through those you work with, regardless of whether it's an adult or a student directly. Those you're supporting are affecting the well-being of our students. And for that, I am deeply grateful. And to our audience, thank you so much for joining us. And please check out CalHOPEschools.org to find 3 programs that are at no charge to you. Programs, one is A Trusted Space, Redirecting Grief to Growth. That is All It Takes program. That's a film and curriculum, videos to support relationship building, support the mental health journey of both the educators and the adult education system, so that we can do a better job with our kids. And Impactful, they have a program called Angst, a film on resiliency and anxiety. Being able to directly work with students and also offer the film to students in middle school and high school. These two films, at Trusted Space and Angst, are both mental health development programs for you to access for free. And the last one in this partnership with CalHOPE Schools Initiative is Stories of Hope by Z Cares. And this is real life in the trenches students talking about their overcoming obstacles and hurdles that were very challenging, and that there's always hope on the other side, and there's always a way through. Things can be hard, life can be hard, but moving through them is possible when we do it as a community. Carol, were you just waving?
Oh, no, I was just scratching my chin.
Oh, I thought you were saying,
sorry.
hey, me. Okay. No. Well, thank you all. And thank you, CalHOPE Schools Initiative, for this opportunity. We look forward to seeing you next month at our Educator series, and in between at our Parent series. And stay tuned on these websites so you know what else is coming in free service and support to you and the youth you serve. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Thanks.